So in this video, I want to talk about the anime known as Boarding School Juliet, or also as I would like to refer to it, Boarding School Romeo and Juliet, as it is a Romeo and Juliet style story. And that is why, of course, it is under the tags Action Comedy Romance School. It is, of course, only 12 episodes as a season, and it came out back in October of 2018, so it's been a blast from the past. It's only been 5 years, but still, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. But this is a series that I really love. I always go back to rewatching it. I love the simplicity of it in itself, of how it takes the basic fundamentals of what is a Romeo and Juliet style story. Two factions at war with each other, they're conflicting, and two people on both sides of the faction are in love with each other. But how it starts it off is a little bit more simple, where it's like they generally do kind of see to hate each other, but because one decides to confess their feelings, she's more open. It's a bit strange because really when you think about it, from her perspective, she thought he hated her and looked down on her, so she grew to hate him, and then suddenly he confesses, and so then she kind of warms up to him very quickly. She's not so skeptical, but at the same time, he is very transparent in his feelings, and that's kind of the cute part about him, is that 1 minute he looks like this hard rock that's just almost, I wouldn't say emotionless, but just like really like angry, always towering over, always trying to stir conflict. And then in these other parts, he's always just sort of heartwarming, cutesy, bawling his eyes out. He's like a little dork, as so to say, and it's really adorable. I really love that part about him. He goes from those two different personalities. It kind of shows the personality that he's showing to his other colleagues that he's living with, and then of course to the one that he has feelings for. And then of course he makes friends with other people in the other faction, which I wouldn't say really friends, but I would say like mutual respect for the interests that they have in herself. So it's just, that's the one aspect I do like about Romeo and Juliet style stories, is when they take like the old school version of Romeo and Juliet and then they take it into an anime spin. And there's other versions of like spins on anime where they've done Romeo and Juliet style stories, like the sci-fi type ones. There's a second season coming out in 2024 for that, where it's swords, shields, magic, sci-fi kind of stuff. It's really cool. But this one just kind of brings it back down to just a simple school setting where two factions are having a difficulty and they're all on an island kind of partially getting along. And you also have like the prefects as well, and how they're kind of like at each other's throats. They kind of belittle each other. They're trying to keep their own houses in line. There's a lot of interesting politics to the layer. Now, you don't really go too deep into the politics in season 1. I do feel like you would probably get into the politics in season 2 much more if it was to ever happen, and that's the thing. I haven't read all the mangas. I've got some of the mangas, but I haven't gotten to them yet, and that's something that I would like to do, because it is a great story. It's got good foundations of what makes a romance. Two individuals that are falling for each other. They're trying to work through their difficulties and challenges of trying to keep their relationship hidden, try and not arouse too many people's suspicion. It's specifically people that would be opposed to it, but it also makes you wonder if those people would be truly opposed to it, or are they just putting up their own facade as well because they just don't care for the whole faction war, but they've got to put that facade on because of it. And that's the thing. It's like two factions kind of butting their heads, but it feels like, in a sense, it could be just that they are butting heads because the one side isn't budging. It's kind of like, well, you stop, no, you stop. And it's just, that's what it is. It's like when one side steps away, will the other side step away? And that's the thing that I was mentioning, is like, I haven't read the source material beyond season 1. So it's like, okay, what is the politics like? How deep is the layer? And what is forcing them to butt heads? Because clearly it's a romance where they're clearly going to get together. I don't think it's going to be a classic Romeo and Juliet where both die. I don't see that. Nah. That's not going to happen. I'm sure someone in the comments will try and spoil it, but it doesn't matter. It's clear as day that they will clearly get together at the end and have their happy little ever after, but it's not that matters. It's the journey that's, to me. How do they get there? How do they overcome all these butting of heads, the factions, and how many more people do discover about their interest in each other, their love interest? Because in the first season, you do get people on both sides finding out, and some cluing onto it, especially with him having the Roselia, the little cross, and that's only a thing for one side of the faction. That's a tradition for them, which is interesting because the way it's done in an anime format, you can kind of feel like, as they say, the white side is more of a Christian side, while the black dog side, or the white cats, is more a Christian side. The black dogs is more of a Japanese style tradition. Two different cultures kind of clashing. So it's interesting how the author's done that. I really like that about it. It's just kind of cool, to say the least. But this is the thing, like, as you're going through the story, people do find out. Close friends to both sides find out, and they do accept it as for what it is. It's just one of those where they're like, yeah, you know what, I'm not particularly impressed, but I'll go along with it because it's your wishes, and they try to help accommodate to that as best as possible. But where I wonder is if the prefects would start to find out, like particularly the two little girls that are like the prodigy kind of girls, will they find out, and how will they deal with it? Because they clearly like the main male protagonist, as much as he can be a little bit stupid at times, dense as a rock, but he's got a genuine good heart. And now that he's said at the end of season 1, he's like, oh yeah, I want to become a prefect. Where is that going to go? And that's the thing, like, sure, I'm telling you what happens in the story, but as it all plays out, there are so many different layers to the story that makes this romance actually genuinely good. It's just not one of those cliche ones where it's just like wrong place, wrong kind of time, not much story to it other than like a beach episode here and there. Like, I like those things, don't get me wrong, I like those things, but you also need to make sure that it's one of those where it's like it's added as extra. It's like an OVA. That's what it should be for. And some animes, when they go into these kinds of romances, they don't do that. Well, this one, yeah, there's a little bit of fan service, but not really that much. And it's mostly there just to kind of like add a little bit of comedic value, kind of add a little bit of breaking the ice between characters. But the layers to the romance, the friendships, the conflict is just really fun to go to. And that's why I always end up coming back to it. But it's a Romeo and Juliet style story, so there's some predictability in it. You always know that there's the two factions, the rivalry, the issues that they've got to delve with. And then, of course, you've got other people that are kind of suspicious of other things as well, because of the fact that the female protagonist, she has this identity that she comes into where she puts on a different color wig and everything. And that's another thing as well. Notice how one faction has all brown hair and the other one has like all blonde and white hair. Kind of a fun little way of kind of making the differences. But there's also these other friends that are kind of like suspicious. I wouldn't really call them friends, but colleagues or mutual acquaintances that are suspicious of the female protagonist when she gender swaps over to a sort of a cutesy male that follows him around. See, that's the thing. There's all the normal generic kind of things that you see in an anime with this, but they're done in such a way that I really like how it complements the story. It just adds fun, comedic, romantic value to it instead of disattaching itself from the overarching story itself. So there's not too much really to talk about, because unless I go into every little detail about the romance itself, like the school festival and the conflict with other students and how there's rivalries within those factions themselves and how not all of them get along and how they're all trying to vie for power, especially on the white cat side. The black dog side, there is some rivalry, but it's more like gang wars kind of style, while the white cats have their own little factions. But you could go into all of that as well, but I don't really see the necessary point in that. What matters to me is that the romance itself is done really well, but it may not be for everyone. It may be too slow paced for some people. Some people really like romances where they just start off right off the bat together, and some people like it where it takes a long burn to get to. I would say this is more in the medium side of things because of the fact that it is 16 volumes. It's clearly takes time to build up the romance, which I think makes sense because the main male protagonist, has got to change how the culture works, try and weaken this barrier between the two factions and allow them to communicate, allow people to stop being so rivalry. And that is the reason why he says at the end that he's going to try and apply for being a perfects, whatever you pronounce it as. And then he goes into his training, which would have been great for a season 2. I think honestly a season 2 would have been great to just see that, and then after that, sure, maybe force us to go watch the source material. But again, it is what it is. I really like it. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.